And I want to start this show off today with our special guests. I have Rachel Brune and I have Elizabeth Donald on the line with me today. Rachel is the founder and the editor of Chrome Girls Press. And I'm really excited about this, ladies. Thank you so much for being on the show with me today.
Our pleasure.
Yeah, we're delighted to be here.
Okay, so Rachel, I have to give you kudos. You are the first and only person that has ever done a press release to be on my show. I am so like I was so tickled when I saw that. I was like, oh my gosh. So I just gonna read this because it's really cool. Local Savannah radio station to feature Chrome Girls Press, Seaside, California, March 27th. A local radio station, a local Savannah radio station will host horror and dark fiction author Elizabeth Donald March 29th. Donald and Chrome Girls Press founder Rachel A. Brune will talk with host Adam Messer about their latest release, Coppice and Break, an anthology of dark fiction featuring tales from the borderlands of horror speculative fiction. And then it talks about where they can listen. And then here is Elizabeth Donald's bio. Elizabeth Donald is a dark fiction writer fond of things that go chomp in the night. She's a three-time winner of the Darrell Award for speculative fiction and finalist for the Prism and I'm not sure how to say this one. Imogen
Imagine.
Imagine. Okay, there we go. Awards author and Nocturne Vampire Mystery Series and Blackfire Dark Fantasy Series, as well as other novels, novellas, and stories in horror, science fiction, and fantasy genres. She is the founder of Literary Underworld Small Press Cooperative, an award-winning journalist an essayist with more than 25 years in journalism, a nature and art photographer, freelance editor, and writing coach. And then here's Rachel's. Here's Rachel's. Rachel Brune. Rachel A. Brune is the founder of Chrome Girls Press, a new indie horror press dedicated to bringing readers the best in dark speculative fiction. Their latest release, Coppice and Break, is now available on Amazon. And then she talks about the availability of reader copies. So thank you so much for being on the show today, y'all. I really appreciate it. Could you tell us a little bit more about yourselves? Rachel, would you mind going first?
Sure. So the reason that you got that press release is because I was having flashbacks to my military journalism and public affairs days.
Yay!
um, and one of the things that I've been trying to do is find different ways to reach out about the stuff we're doing. We have some really excellent writers who have put in some really amazing work, and so I'm just trying to spread the word. And so the press release is basically saying, hey, come find us, come listen. Adam, you always ask great questions, and I always love being on the show. So I was just trying to spread, like I said, spread the word as much as possible.
Well, it tickled me to see that you did a press release. I was like, wow. Bobby Nash is really good about sharing, and I always love when he's on the show too because he does a great job of putting it out there. And when I saw this press release, I was like, oh my gosh, Rachel, this is so cool. And Elizabeth, this is like the first time we've talked over the phone. So tell me more about you.
Well, I mean, the bio covers the fiction work, the journalism. Yeah, I probably do a few press releases in my own time because 25 years in journalism, you can't really shake it. You're never an ex-journalist. Maybe it's like being a Marine. You're never actually free of it. I left full-time journalism in 2018 to go back to school. I'm currently a grad student, therefore the oldest student in the room most of the time. And I'm within a month or two of finishing my master's degree in media studies, knock on wood. There's not going to be a graduation ceremony. The coronavirus is taking care of that. But fortunately, I should be wrapping up the master's degree shortly. And I teach news writing and guest lecture on journalism ethics in my spare time.
Oh wow.
These days, we have a little more spare time than we like, mind you, but
And I have to apologize, everybody. I didn't realize we were still we still had some technical difficulties there.
oh
Seems
dear.
like the folks that might be listening in might have heard an overlap there because of a problem. I must not have turned automation off, so I'm sorry about that, y'all. But we are here today with Rachel Brune and Elizabeth Donald. And so, for those of you tuning in now, the recording later on will be clear. Won't have that on there, luckily. But if you're just now tuning in, Rachel's new Chrome Girls Press Copus and Break anthology just came out. The 21st?
Yes. So
Yes.
a week ago.
Yeah. So tell me about that.
Well, so Chrome Girls Press is releasing two anthologies this year, and Coppice and Break is the first one. Now, the one that's going to show up in October is going to be pure horror. But when I was reading the submissions, and especially in our first anthology, we had stories that pushed the boundaries of the genre. And so we had stories that were just,
Did you have any
they were
stories
really,
that might have almost crossed the line but not quite?
a few. We had
Yeah.
more than a few. And the thing was, I wanted to. So the idea for our publishing house was to be primarily horror, but to also explore some of the fiction that is dark and intense and disturbing, but sometimes offers a little bit of hope. And so the stories in Coppice and Break, some of them indeed are straight horror. Some of them are horror with a smidgen of science fiction. Some of them are, I think, one of our reviewers who basically live tweeted her reading of the anthology referred to Elizabeth's story as almost like a Stephen King type of horror, where it's a very contemporary setting without a lot of scary stuff, but just like that dread that's there.
I missed that one. I'm gonna have to catch that.
I'll find it.
Actually, I read it today, and I thought it was I thought it was pretty good. I wouldn't. I don't know if I felt like it was dreadful. I felt like it was a fairy tale. Um,
Almost.
yeah, because kind of like well, the guy Sean. He's
Ah,
No
yeah.
spoilers.
well, I can say the character's name, right?
Yeah.
He's very relatable, and I think it was. I felt like it was a decent story as far as that. I really didn't feel like it was, like dreadful, but I did feel like it was a really good, build up for suspense. So,
Yes. So that suspense and that idea of there being things in a contemporary world that we don't necessarily see except out of the corner of our eye.
hmm
That story really kind of fit exactly what I was looking for. And then we have some stories that have these kind of horror elements. Like we have a story in which the character, the protagonist, every time she speaks a lie, a spider pops out of her mouth.
ooh,
Oh God.
Right? So that's kind of yucky. Like it gives me. I was reading that story, and I have a pretty severe entomophobia, and I was reading that, and like, oh my goodness, this is not my favorite thing. But that is that is one of the stories that ends on this note of hope, and so trying to launch a dark fiction and horror anthology in the middle of a pandemic was maybe not the best timing.
well, it's
Um,
so weird because I feel like leading up to your release, it was. I think you did a great job. I mean, this pandemic was unexpected on a lot of people, and no, I mean nobody expected it, and it's just crazy because right now there are there are so many people who are sharing their work, who are giving their work away. Like, I mean, I know I shared my books for free,
mhm.
and so I don't know. It's kind of weird. I feel like it's going to have its time, and I've been sharing. I really enjoy it. I think it's a great. I've been reading stories here and there with it. I've been kind of just jumping around, and I read yours today, Elizabeth. I think it was really nice.
Thank you.
Um, but I think you did a great job, especially I can see the improvements from the first one, the stories we tell after midnight. Um, and it's just like little things like the formatting and some of the other stuff is it's just like a process. It's improved, and I think you've done a really good job with it.
Thanks. Well,
I
you
haven't had a
definitely.
chance
Oh,
to read it
go ahead.
myself actually because my copies just arrived like the other day. So I've only read my own story, but I'm really looking forward to it because I love the stories we tell after midnight, and I trust Rachel's got a wonderful eye for quality fiction. I ascribe kind of towards the Harlan Ellison school, where the best stories are where extraordinary things happen to ordinary people. And I find that if you see your characters as relatable humans that are people that we might know, then when they encounter something like spiders popping out of the mouth, I might have to skip that story. I don't know. But that makes it more relatable to readers who are probably more so now than ever looking for something a little bit outside the ordinary, outside of their houses, to entertain them.
And speaking of entertainment, my son Sebastian is a musician, and he always plays live music for us here on the show. So, Sebastian, do you mind playing some for us? There we go. We actually have new metal guards in front of the microphones now, so it's a little different. But here's Sebastian Messer, everybody. Thanks, Bass. And everybody tuning in today, you're listening to the Adam Messer Show here on WRUULP Savannah, Georgia, 107.5 FM, WRUU.org. We are Savannah Soundings Community Radio with Global Soul. And my special guests today are Rachel Brune and Elizabeth Donald. And we're talking about the new Crone Girls Press anthology release, Coppice and Break. Am I saying that right, or do you pronounce it Coppice and Break? Or
Coppice and Break.
okay, cool.
Oh, good. I've been saying it right.
Yeah, because I wasn't really sure. It's one of those words I've never heard out loud. I just learned from reading. So, all right. So let's talk a little bit about what you feel like is a good way to approach writing. And because y'all have written journalism, you've done articles and things like that, and you do interviews. And Elizabeth, my background too is I have been writing for the Savannah Morning News, do Savannah since 2014, and so I do like event articles. I don't do any. I don't call it hard journalism. I call it popcorn because it's light and fluffy and people like it. So I don't do like politics or anything like that. But I do, I do interview a lot of people, and so let's start with you, Elizabeth. Since Rachel, I start with you first time last time. What do you feel like makes a good story? I know you just said that you like with ordinary people having extraordinary things happen to them, but what do you feel like it makes a good story, and what appeals to you when you're reading?
Oh, I want to ask something hard. I mean, it's you kind of know it when you see it. I find that stories for me tend to grow out of either an image or what if. You can find an image. I think when I was very young and I was working on my very first story, which thank God has never seen print because it was terrible. But I had an image of a young woman climbing a rope ladder against the side of a building as the city is burning down behind her, and out of that came my first novel, which again buried deep where no one human can see it except for a couple friends in college who refused to burn their copies. Um, so that's an entire story working backward from an image, whereas the others are kind of what if. When I was working on my zombie series, I had been actually assigned to write a novella about zombies from then New Babel Press. And of course, that ended up with another publisher when the project was canceled. But they just said, write us something about zombies. They were doing a collection of stories about traditional monsters written in non-traditional ways. And so I had to do a what if what if about zombies? What if we try to create a story about zombies that doesn't depend on blood and entrails, but instead on emotional horror, where the blood and guts are at a minimum. And out of that came the Cold Ones, which then turned into a series. So I think that's generally where stories begin for me, and they have to be character driven, because when you have stories with wooden characters who don't mean anything to the people they're reading, then you're just reading a recitation of events, and that's not a story. A story needs to be driven by real people, or as real as we can draw them, and that's where the craft comes in.
Okay. I think that's really interesting. I feel that the emotions of a story are really the connection in a story as well. So, what are your thoughts, Rachel?
Well, I think that's probably why every time I read one of Elizabeth's stories that she sends me, I like start ugly crying right in the middle. Like, oh my goodness.
Yes, that's the fist pump. Yes, I made Richard cry again.
Oh my gosh. Well, there's so for me, okay, so this is a question that I put out in our Facebook group. At one point I kind of just asked the folks in there, I was like, what kind of horror, what horror is the most disturbing? What do you find the scariest horror? Um, and I forget the person who answered, but their answer was the ability of humans to act in evil ways to each other. So sometimes this is a very banal sort of evil, that allows people to look away from terrible, terrible things, or to get to the point where they actively participate in them. And we see this all throughout history, that we really can't delude ourselves. Human beings are absolutely um, capable of participating in evil. And that was the answer, I think, that won that particular giveaway. That's also something that I find very um, that's something that I find in some of the best horror out there. It's not the only thing, but for me, that's something that definitely rings true. And it could be in a very matter of fact way that it's incorporated in writing. It could be something that's a little bit more um, just part of the conflict and part of the plot. And it could be something that's just so embedded in the character that there's no way this character will ever be redeemed, which in horror is something that you can do. You don't have to have a happy ending in horror. Which is is also maybe not, or maybe the reason why it wasn't the best idea to launch a horror anthology right about now. But for instance, in the anthology, Edmund's story, Trumpet Voluntary, that was when I first read that, when I opened it up in the submissions pile, it was so disturbing that I had to stop reading for a little while. And it wasn't gory. It wasn't there was not a chainsaw to be seen, and it was ostensibly a classical music setting, which I love classical music. And because there were so many familiar touch points for me within the story, the horrific element, like I said, it was so disturbing. I had to stop reading, and I don't think I read any more submissions that day, and it put him right on the short list.
Yeah.
Oh wow.
um, but yeah, for me, that's what I find to be the most impactful. And I do say for me, because every editor is obviously different.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I tell you what, it's crazy because I think it's different for everybody. What they like to read and what they feel like. But I feel like everything that we do is a story, and
Mm.
our conversations, our communication, everything we do, it's a form of storytelling, and I. I really feel like it is. When you talk about the human condition and you go back to the human condition, uh, like you said, Rachel, the participatory part. That's what
Mm-hmm.
always blows my mind because it's easy to look 2020 hindsight and say, hey, oh well, they shouldn't have done this or they shouldn't have done that. And we look back at barbaric traditions of the past. But
Mm-hmm.
if you look at like Rome, for example. If you look at some of the barbaric traditions that they had, and they considered themselves to be the most civilized, of cultures compared to the people around them. So I think it is interesting how folks can, participate in evil, and not only participate but also, to I guess to cheer it on, or to to make a propel it forward, I guess.
Get swept up in it.
Yeah,
Well,
kind
no
of like
one
a
is a villain in their own minds. I mean, no bad guy
right.
ever said, "Haha, I am the mustache twirling villain." No, they all believe that they are perfectly justified in what they're doing.
The
Uh,
victim mentality. Yeah, I've seen that a lot.
Or even the hero mentality. I
Yeah,
I must do this in order to accomplish this goal, and everybody will
like
cheer me
Thanos
on.
and the Avengers. Thanos is like, I'm sacrificing this. It's like, dude, you just killed half the universe. So
on the
It was
flip
for a
side,
good
I've often
cause.
said the Avengers' biggest problem was Tony, but you know, that's
yeah,
just me also.
yeah, that's crazy. What Well, Rachel, and everybody in the backdrop here, maybe you're tuning in for the first time, but I think Rachel, I think I've known you what, almost 2 years, maybe close to it. Um,
Yeah.
and we met through Bobby Nash, and so you read my story, Blood Thrasher, and then you interviewed me for Infamous Scribbler,
Yep.
and then you were putting out the first anthology, and you invited me to be part of that. And so now I am working on my own anthology with it's called A Devil's Due. And so I've been asking you different questions and talking to you. And um, one of the things that I've noticed with working with writers is that sometimes not that people can get caught up in their own mentality, but sometimes we have that myopic vision because it's a piece of work that we're doing, and it's not that necessarily it's bad. It's just that it's hard to remove yourself from your writing. So as an
Hmm.
editor, what would you say? And this goes to for you as well, Elizabeth. But what would you say to other writers who are out there and they're working on a piece of fiction or whatever? It could be anything. But what would you say to them as far as how do you kind of break out of that cycle of you know being able to look at your own work objectively and versus being myopic with it?
Geez, that's a good question because I still will send something to an editor or something like that, and I'll get it back fully expecting it to be all, with marked up with edits and all this stuff, and I'll still open it up and see that somebody wants me to write something in a different way, even if it's like a sentence or something like that, and still feel this feeling of, no, it's my baby, you can't touch it.
Right.
And it's this visceral reaction at, no. But something that I have learned, because I have been doing this for a while, is that change doesn't necessarily, and these edits don't necessarily mean that somebody thinks you were wrong. They're trying to find a way to make it better. And that is to be able to have that objectivity to look at an edit and say, yes, this will make it better, or no, I feel strongly enough that it should remain in its previous form. That's something that comes from a lot of experience of writing and getting your work edited and being able to evaluate it. If you're getting that feedback back from an anthology editor or someplace where your work's been accepted for publication, um, you can still talk with the editor about it. I try when I'm sending edits back to explain if I've made a change, or I'll ask a question like, hey, wasn't this person just sitting down? How are they standing up? Or something like that, so that the writer is not getting this feeling that I'm saying, here, you do this, this, and this. They're going to understand that this is how we can work together to make your work better. And so that's what I try to remind myself of when I'm on the receiving end of those edits.
I'm not sure that you can ever really be completely objective about your work because, I mean, it's the baby. When people ask me, so which is your favorite of your novels? I'm like, oh, yeah, which is the favorite of my children? But I think that you can develop a bit of that. I don't want to say tough skin because we still need to remain sensitive to criticism and try to look at it through their viewpoint to see if what they're saying is valid, which most of the time it is, and sometimes, of course, it's not. But I think that when you work as a journalist, that helps a great deal because the literary criticism for journalists is frequently in the form of internet comment sections.
Oh
And
yeah,
once
yeah.
we have been barraged with, I think my favorite was one. I worked for a paper called the Belleville News Democrat, and they called me the Wicked Witch of the BND, and I was very proud of that, and I wanted it on a T-shirt. So when that kind of feedback, yeah, then some fiction editor comes along and gently suggests that this might be a little more impactful if you move this around or you use this kind of term, this vary the language here. That just doesn't feel as harsh.
Right, right.
I can't share the rest of the comments from the internet section because we're on the radio, but I think that you do develop a bit of a tougher skin when you get used to getting feedback from a lot of people, and you just have to maintain some kind of perspective on it. That a lot of times, what people are telling you about your story is feedback that you need in order to make it a better story, so that it better communicates what you were trying to say to your readers. And then sometimes you'll get somebody complaining that you didn't explain the tensile strength of the aliens' exoskeletons. So how could that bullet? How do you know that the bullets actually penetrate them? Well, because I said so.
Right. Your universe, you created it. Yeah, I get it. Yeah.
That was an actual complaint. I got one.
That's yeah. I think it's really funny because any kind of nerd dome or any kind of lore or whatever, you get the call it the rules lawyering kind of people.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
and it's one of those things where I don't really care what color the freckle was on the gnat. I just said there was a freckle on the gnat. So well, what color was it? I don't know.
Whatever I said in the last
Yeah,
book.
it was
When
fuchsia.
I was writing my vampire series for Faradwin Press and Alora's Cave back in that was okay. It's a while ago. And with between the first and the second book, in the first book, the vampire had 7 wives. By the second book, he had 5 wives. Now that particular, he misplaced a couple apparently, and that particular glitch got past me, my supervising editor, the managing editor, 2 line editors, and a proofreader. It still got through. Uh, so I got them to fix it in the paperback. But sometimes it's helpful to get that little bit of feedback.
And sometimes your main character changes names halfway through the story.
Just
I've had that a few times.
she's
Yeah.
talking about me. Sean's name's accidentally morphed halfway through the story. Fortunately, she caught it. Thank you, Rachel, because that would have been very embarrassing.
I actually, it's kind of weird. I had that happen with spelling, like the same name but spelling it 2 different ways. And at first, I spelled it one way, and then when I changed it, and I didn't even catch on that I had changed it until I was, rereading it. I was like, "Oh, this is not good. I maybe should, correct that." And then I had to change it. I had to correct it like 50 times. So, but luckily they
I
got
made
the change all. So,
Yeah, I made an intentional choice once on a novel that actually has never been published because it also sucks. But partway through, I decided, this bounty hunter would be a lot more interesting as a woman than as a man, and so I changed the gender partway through, and then I had to keep like leaving highlights in the like go back and fix, go back and fix.
yeah.
Uh, I've
All
never
right,
have because
we
I
need
never
to do a
bothered to try to
station
help
break,
them.
so I'll be right back. Hold on one second, everybody.
Go ahead.
WRUULP, Savannah, Georgia, 107.5 FM, WRUU.org. We are Savannah's Soundings Community Radio with Global Soul.
This portion of WRUU-LP Savannah Soundings programming is brought to you by listeners and the Ships of the Sea Museum. One of the hidden secrets of the Ships of the Sea Museum is its gardens. Native plants are interspersed with exotic tropical plants throughout the gardens. Visitors can enjoy everything that has earned the Ships of the Sea Museum the Trip Experts 2015 Experts Choice Award. You can find out more about the Ships of the Sea Museum at the website shipsofthesea.org. This is a message from the Georgia State Department of Public Health. There is a State of Georgia hotline people can call with questions or if they think they may have been exposed to the COVID-19 virus. It is 1-844-442-2681. If you believe you're experiencing symptoms of COVID-19 or have been exposed to the novel coronavirus, please contact your primary care doctor, an urgent care clinic, or your local federally qualified healthcare center. Please do not show up at an emergency room or healthcare facility unannounced. More information can be found at dph.georgia.gov. Voting is now open for Connect Savannah's annual Best of Savannah Readers Poll, and WRUU is once again on the ballot. Last year, you voted us best in the local radio station and talk radio station categories. Continue your support of WRUU 107.5 FM by again voting for us in the Best Local Radio Station and Best Local Talk Radio Station categories. And this year, vote for your favorite WRUU morning program and favorite WRUU host. Voting ends at 11:59 p.m. sharp on Tuesday, April 14th, and results will be revealed the night of Tuesday, May 19th. For details and voting, visit connectsavannah.com. And as always, thank you for listening to, supporting, and voting for WRUU-LP Savannah.
All right, everybody. Thank you and welcome back. Appreciate you supporting WRUU. And this is your host. I'm your host, Adam Messer, and this is the Adam Messer Show. You're listening to us on WRUU-LP Savannah, Georgia, 107.5 FM, WRUU.org. We are Savannah Soundings Community Radio with Global Soul. And my special guests today are Rachel Brune and Elizabeth Donald. And we're talking about the new Chrome Girls Press horror anthology, Coppice and Break. So welcome back, ladies. Thank you so much for being with me today. So before the break, we were talking a little bit about how you can look at your own work objectively. And the feeling I got from both of you was to actually send it off to someone else to look at and then get their feedback. But I want to dig more into like writing and your perspective of the change in the horror field of writing, because I guess last month, February, was Women in Horror Month, and yeah, so there are a lot more people writing today. And can you tell me more about like being a woman in horror and how things have changed, like the landscape has changed for you?
Oh, probably Elizabeth would be the best person to take that particular question.
Oh, thanks.
Well, I was going to say, I actually, except for the bad timing with the pandemic, I've been the very lucky recipient of just an explosion of interest in the genre, and especially a lot of really excellent women authors and editors like Ellen Datlow having popularized a lot of horror and also given it, a lot of made it very public that there's a lot of really excellent women in horror. So I haven't really faced any of those challenges, maybe yet. But I know that Elizabeth's been writing in the genre a lot longer than I have been publishing it.
I have been. I was I had my first few books out way back when dinosaurs roamed the earth. When I was with Alora's Cave for my first couple of books, and they were doing ebooks before there was such a thing as a Kindle. So ebooks are a hard sell without Kindles, by the way. Um,
I can
so
imagine so.
and I was always, I mean, at the 20 years ago, I was writing horror short stories, and I was getting a little bit of success, sort of success for me, not so much for the magazines. I'd get a short story accepted to a horror magazine, and then it would turn out to be the last issue of that magazine. I killed like three in a row. So I was kind of the Typhoid Mary of horror fiction, the early 2000s. Sorry, but I did. I finally broke into book publishing by writing horror romance for Alora's Cave for a little while, all the while still trying to break in through through mainstream horror. Is there such a thing as mainstream horror? I don't know. I may have just made it up. So I definitely see that it's certainly more open now than it was. I think because I was getting started around the time that you saw a lot of paranormal romance moving into horror circles, that there was initially a lot of resistance there. I remember the first year, I think the only year that Alora's Cave did Dragon Con. It was my first Dragon Con. I was very excited, and there was a lot of ugliness. There were a lot of awful things said to us, and so I think there was a lot of resistance at first, but I don't see nearly as much of it now. There's still a sense that and why does this relate to gender? Well, because the majority of romance writers, by no means not all, the majority of romance writers are women, and I found that as long as I was writing vampires, I was accepted quite enthusiastically in paranormal romance. Somewhat less enthusiastically, but still mostly accepted in horror. Then when I started switching over to zombies, that's when I really saw some strangeness. Where I remember once asking, I was always on the midnight sex panel, always, always, always. And then I was at a convention, and it had a zombie panel. It had a couple of my friends on it, Brian Keene and Jonathan Mayberry and Brian Smith, really great masters of the zombie genre. And I had a zombie book coming out, so I asked to be put on it, and they got a wise ass grin and sorry, and said, "Oh well, this is kind of a guy thing." Fortunately, the gentleman's wife happened to be sitting next to him and threatened to glue his head to the table if he didn't put me on the panel. So I could get on the panel and talk about zombies. But and I know he was pulling my chain, but it kind of crystallized for me that, yeah, I was moving into an area that was very largely that considered to be a male domain of horror, a subgenre that was primarily men. And that's not the case. I mean, there are a lot of women who write zombies, who write what are considered to be, I guess, harder horror. I don't know that that's actually a thing. There may be a phrase for it that I'm just not as familiar with. But I still feel like we do have to fight a lot of preconceptions. I mean, when I first got started, because I was writing books that were appearing first in ebook and came out in print 6 months later, one convention rewrote my bio to call me an aspiring author.
What?
Oh, wow.
Yeah, the book I was writing was in every Borders in America, but somehow I was aspiring. So I got a lot better. I think that as people have started to understand that fiction comes in many forms from many different voices, and I think that's getting better. I don't remember much of a celebration of things like Women in Horror Month back before the evils of social media took over the world. So, for all that social media may encourage some of the ugliest parts of human discourse, it's also encouraging more ideas to spread to more people, and that can only be a good thing.
Yeah, I agree. Sebastian, do you mind playing a little bit for us? And this is Sebastian Messer, everybody. Honestly, I love listening to his live music. It's one of those things with the show. I feel like it's an add-on, and I want to give a shout out to all of our listeners at home. I know we've got Terry and Darlene listening because they're the ones that sent me the message about the technical issues. So thank you very much for catching that, and everybody else who's listening at home, I appreciate you. And here's Sebastian Messer. Nice job, Bass. Thank you. So, all right, everybody. You are listening to us today. We're talking a little bit about the horror genre, and we're having a good time with Rachel Brune and Elizabeth Donald. Rachel, this question is just for you.
Uh-oh. Dun-dun-dun-dun.
Da-da-da-da. No, I'm just kidding. Um, with your background, you're a veteran, and there are a lot of veterans in the field who are writing. What do you feel like is a way that you can encourage other people who are veterans to share their work with people?
Um, that's so. I have found that there are a lot of folks who are writing, and the there's a couple of different categories of veteran writers. The first is folks who are writing more serious literary fiction, poetry, geez, like I I'm trying to think of like contemporary. They're writing contemporary fiction, I think would be the best way. And also some nonfiction, some memoir, some narrative nonfiction, all of those which are being shared and published and distributed through projects such as the Veterans Writing Project, or through the, so a friend of mine has a Patreon called the Aiming Circle, and he distributes to the Patreon members calls for submissions for various military themed anthologies like Proud to Be, like I said, through the aforementioned Veterans Writing Project. There are also a number of organizations that host writing workshops specifically for veterans. And I'm totally blanking on all of them at the moment, but they are a Google search away. And some of those are just doing really excellent work, getting veterans the resources to learn how to put their experiences on paper, how to develop fiction from those experiences, and then to get it published and out to the world. There's also a really huge contingent of military sci-fi writers and folks like Craig Martell who are leading the charge on the indie publishing scene, who are also veterans who are writing just really incredibly great military science fiction, military fantasy. One of my favorite authors, Michael, who writes military speculative fiction or writes speculative fiction, just came out with 16th Watch, which I have queued up on my Kindle. I have not had a chance to start reading yet, but that's like a Coast Guard in space. I'm not doing the book description justice at all. But speculative fiction has a lot of veterans writing and sharing experiences through the lens of speculative fiction, which is really great because it's such a popular genre. I
Now,
have another.
take a pause for a second.
Yep.
Can you expand on, because speculative fiction might not be a familiar term with everybody, can you expand on what you mean by speculative fiction?
Sure. I'm basically using it as an umbrella term for any sort of fiction that has fantasy or science fiction elements. Because saying science fiction and fantasy multiple times in a row can take up a lot of time. But it's tough. It's fiction that takes place either in a modern world with fantastical elements like urban fantasy or dark fantasy, or in a future world with future tech and situations like science fiction, or in a world where magic is part of the fabric of life, like fantasy, and you've got your high fantasy and you've got your epic fantasy and all the different genres and subgenres that you could possibly find. And so when I say speculative fiction, I'm really just referring to this whole umbrella that encompasses all of those genres and subgenres.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
For me personally, my goal, my one of the personal goals that I have as a writer, as an editor, as a publisher, is to help military writers, help veterans and military family members and folks who are affiliated with the military and veteran community get their stories out there. I really do feel that we've got some interesting tales to tell, and they can be very exciting and very fun. And I would very much encourage veterans and military members who do write horror and dark fiction to take advantage of one of our submissions periods to send me some, because I would like some more. And yeah, so that's, I think, what I've seen. There are a lot of opportunities out there, both in writing fiction and writing nonfiction, and poetry and anything else you can think of.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Everybody, you're listening to us here on WRUULP Savannah, Georgia, 107.5 FM, WRUU.org. We are Savannah Soundings Community Radio with Global Soul. I agree with you, Rachel. I'm not a veteran myself. My dad was in the Army, and he was a veteran. And he actually wrote a couple of different stories. And obviously, self-publishing has really changed a lot, especially in the last 10 years, in the last 5 years or so. But he wrote a couple of different fantasy stories, and and I think it's interesting because, like you said earlier, Elizabeth, about social media changing things. It's opened it up, and it's made it more accessible for people. But I think that it's also opened up the dark side of things too, because you get a lot of internet trolls and things like that. But I feel like, in a way, today it's so much more accessible for people to be able to learn how to self-publish. There's so many resources out there. Like you were mentioning, Rachel, Craig Martell. He was on the show last week, and he's going to be on the show next week. And we were talking about self-publishing, and they've got that 20 books to 50K group, and there's a lot of resources out there. So I think it's interesting, especially me getting into besides self-publishing, but also getting into working on an anthology as a publisher for a small indie press. There are a lot of challenges, I feel like, with it, and it's not that it's a incredibly huge, steep learning curve, but Rachel, you and I talked last week and on the phone, and we were just talking about like the time that we've got right now. It seems like I've been working because I do electrical work. I've been working at my day job still, but the last couple of days I've just been, I think, just drained from all the social stress and stuff like that. And here I am actually in the radio station right now, but if I wasn't doing the show, I'd be at home, So a lot of things have been, going on. And I imagine, for veterans, because a lot of veterans deal with post-traumatic stress disorder, that, complications like this and situations like this can add to that stress. And I feel like writing and reading is a great outlet for people who are dealing with difficulties.
It's it's funny that you say that. What I have found is that social media, in addition to making it much easier to spread the word about a new launch or about a book or writing or something like that, it is also allowed a chance to very quickly become integrated in the local community. Mm-hmm. And so wherever we go, there does tend to be a group for military families. So we live in, we moved to California, and one of the first things we did was join the local neighborhood group, join a group of parents, military parents, and those sorts of connections can help provide that outlet. Especially during a time like this. My spouse and I have been sitting here making these DIY face masks.
Oh yeah, that's so awesome, by the way.
And there was some question, are these worthwhile? I think now they've started to actually be requested by certain patterns and things. But I just put it out on one of those local groups and connected with people and was able to exchange here you go. I have a couple of folks locally, and those are all part of the military community. So we do have ways of connecting and working through things. The thing that I find where writing comes in is communicating all of the parts of our story to the wider public. So for some people, actually, I think for a lot of people, if you don't have a family member in the military or, an acquaintance who was in the military, who has actually wanted to sit down and talk about what they do for work on their off time, you may not be as familiar with what it's actually like. And so my goal in trying to encourage veterans to write is not necessarily to hit up on the writing as therapy aspect. That I feel that that's for some people who are actually qualified to do that. I am not. But rather to find those interesting parts of the human story that military community members are uniquely qualified to share.
That's a good way to put it. That's a good way to put it. Well, we're going to take a little break, everybody, until 4 o'clock. And so you've been listening to The Adam Messer Show. I'm your host, Adam Messer. My special guests today are Rachel Brune and Elizabeth Donald. And we've been talking about the new Chrome Girls Press. Rachel is the founder and editor of Chrome Girls Press, the new Chrome Girls Press horror anthology, Coppice and Break. And Rachel, before we go, where can people find this anthology?
Currently, Amazon. And if you order it in print, you will be waiting for some time. But if you have a Kindle, then you can order it on Kindle, and it'll be downloaded right then and there.
And local folks, you can get the first anthology at eShaver Booksellers because I took a couple copies over there and they're autographed. So if you want to pick one up, you can call them and order them. Of course, they're not open today, but you can call tomorrow. So I just want to share that with everybody because I actually asked Rachel to sign all the copies before she sent me them. So thank you, Rachel. All right, we're going to be back at 4 o'clock, everybody. Thanks a lot.
You are listening to WRUU-LP, Savannah, Georgia, 107.5